Did you notice how the corona hoax quickly faded when enough people stopped believing this scam? The COVID narrative had to be over before it was replaced by something else. That's because people's reaction will be too unpredictable when they're overwhelmed with too much information. The world majority's behavior is more controllable this way. So I want to figure out what the purpose of the supposed war between Russia and Ukraine aims to achieve. Let's start with the reaction of someone who thinks zero moves ahead. And if this term doesn't mean anything to you, you got some catching up to do. The same people who demanded that I and
get the vaccine.
now changed their profile photo on Facebook and shout at Putin in protests. As if Russia's leader is going to see there were 500 hipsters screaming in San Francisco and say, know what? Maybe this went too far.
General, I hope the commander is up to speed because we don't have time to waste.
I'm sure Tanya has every confidence in you, Commander.
These people are falling for Western propaganda once again, and they will fall for the next one as well. Thinking one move ahead means you recognize that the media doesn't share your interests, but you still fall into a trap. Too many people believe that if Western governments are their enemies, that means they should support Russia in this conflict. There are theories of Putin destroying Biden's cocaine lab or something like that going around.
How do we get to the place where, Putin decides he's going to just invade Russia?
Here are two things to consider if you think Putin is your friend. One, Klaus Schwab claims that Putin graduated the leaders program of the World Economic Forum. Two, Putin's first wife claims that the real Putin was killed and replaced by the CIA. Do you think you know him better than his wife? Our goal should always be avoiding traps by thinking at least two moves ahead and prepare for as many scenarios as we can. Propaganda exists on both sides and makes it difficult to know what's really going on, even for those who are in the area. I want to focus on the bottom line. What does this war mean for us? The immediate results for this conflict are the trigger of hyperinflation and shortage of supplies. Right now, this mostly affects the countries that are involved in this conflict, but it is likely to affect the rest of the European continent later on. There is an economic boycott on Russia that will create extreme poverty and lead to mass immigration out of the country. The next issue is energy crisis. The price of electricity and gas will go up. This can be disguised as a product of the war or as hacker attacks as predicted by the Cyber Polygon event. Ukraine is said to be a war zone now, but it's hard to know how bad it really is with all of the falsified information that is shared. Now, if we take a look at what happens to the society in this area, there are claims that the Ukrainian government releases prisoners and arms everyone. This, along with the destabilization of the place, create rise in crime. Most people who can live do anything they can to live. This situation causes manipulation of real estate value. Much like what happened in Harlem in New York, rise in crime leads to residents desperately looking for buyers to their property. After the property is sold for cheap, police forces are sent to clean the area from criminals and homeless people, and the value of the property rises. Keep that in mind because I will revisit the importance of this real estate later in this video. There will be a few outcomes in case European countries decide to reinforce Ukrainian army. The fighting, or what we're told is a war with Russia, will result with bombings in big cities, either by Russia or by false flags. A false flag is a common strategy where one party attacks a target and puts the blame on someone else. Known examples are the burning of the German parliament by Hitler and the attack on 9/11. But it actually happens on daily basis. Undercover cops initiating fights in protests and accusing protesters of being violent is a false flag on smaller scale. Don't be surprised if a government bombs its own people to get them to react in a certain way during this conflict. If the fighting does escalate, there will be a few developments. One measure that will be taken is closing the borders between countries in Europe. There might also be discrimination against Russians, incidents where businesses provide no service and Russian people face hostile treatment. This can happen in Western societies by people who consume Western propaganda. The media hype makes me think that we're being prepared for something really big. If that's the case, you can also expect that what happens in Ukraine will happen all over Europe. People leaving their homes because it became impossible to stay there. Governments drafting men of age to the military, sending them to battle without proper training like in World War II. The situation could be used as an excuse to implement martial law around Europe. This means stricter restrictions on movement, so you can't leave home without a permit. Last and most important issue I want to discuss here. At the moment of making this video, the fighting is in Ukraine. Will it stay there or will it continue somewhere else? The media prepares us for the fighting to progress north towards Belarus, the Baltic countries, and Poland. The mainstream media never shares the information we need unless it's too late to act on it, which is the first reason for why I believe the fighting will go south. The second reason I am convinced the war will spread towards Moldova, Romania, and Bulgaria requires some background. One of the goals of the World Economic Forum is to populate all of mankind in megacities. If you want to have an image of the kind of place that Klaus Schwab plans to cage us in, you can think of Shanghai in China, but with a lot more surveillance and AI systems implemented in them to keep everything in order. Every person will get a small private place in the city and no access to nature. These kind of cities are also displayed pretty well in the movie Judge Dredd. The reason I mentioned the megacities vision is that the World Economic Forum was kind enough to share this map with us. That's the plan for population centers in 2030. There's a lot of information we can analyze in this map, but to base my prediction on the future of Russia's supposed war with the West, I want to focus on one location. This location is south of the Russian megacity of Moscow and St. Petersburg and north of the Middle Eastern megacity of Israel and Egypt. But unlike the two megacities, this place is mostly made of traditional cultures and no dense population. This area southwest of the Black Sea is populated by a number of cultures. To be able to build this megacity, it is necessary to remove everyone who lives there and completely destroy it first. The war will be used as an excuse for the destruction, and those who escape the war zone will live as refugees after losing all of their possessions. If I'm correct about it, this proves collaboration between Russia and the West. If you live in Bulgaria, should you flee your country leaving everything behind? Not necessarily. Given the starting point of a big war in Europe that involves many nationalities, our best comparison to the current conflict is World War II. While those who lived in big cities suffered shortages and dangerous situations, those in the countryside weren't affected so much. You could find shelter in a small village for now and plan your moves. Military resources will be directed towards big population centers, and if your location is remote enough, you won't have to deal with authorities at all. It's a numbers game for now, so low dense populations are low priority.